Good morning, students. This is your first chapter in history, where, when, and how. So in this chapter, you'll understand about various events that took place in modern period across the globe. But before we start with modern period, I would like you to quickly revise the other two periods. You must have read in previous classes also that your history is divided into three periods. That is your ancient period, medieval period, and modern period. So in ancient period, you must have read in class 6th that how people they learned, or how humans they learned to survive, how they made tools out of various things like stones, metals like copper and iron, how they became hunters and gatherers, and later how they shifted their life from hunters and gatherers to leading a settled life, and they came to be known as farmers. In class 7th, you must have read about medieval phase. In medieval period, you must have read about various dynasties, various rulers, king. You must have read about Delhi Sultanate, Mughal rule. And in class 8, you will be reading about modern phase, that is your modern history. Not only about India, but you'll read across the globe. So let's see your introductory topic, that is time frame and outline. In this, exactly what I explained, it is given about the division of history into three periods, like ancient, medieval, and modern. And it is also given how India was in its medieval period when Europe started with modern period, which means that different periods started at different point of time in the world. Now look into your first topic, that is modern period and overview. In this topic, your 4 points are given that you can see. Your first topic point is beginning of European Renaissance. Now what is your Renaissance? Renaissance is a period between 14th and 17th century. This period marked the transition from the medieval to modern period. That means everything in the world changed from medieval phase to modern phase. Not only literature, but art, culture, dance, everything, means outlook of the people changed. They started having a modern outlook towards various things. So when the outlook will change, definitely people will go for exploration. They'll go for new inventions, discoveries. So one such major change was that at that time, the most powerful people in the world were Turkish people. So they took control over the major trade routes. So this forced Europeans to look for an alternative sea routes, since they were also equally interested in having trade. And at that time, means of trade, or you can say means of transport, was sea. So they looked for, or they started exploring new alternative sea routes to east. The zest for adventure encouraged long sea voyage. That means since they had to explore, they had to find out such places, so they started going on long sea voyage. Discovery of the new sea routes by various explorers like Magellan, Columbus, etc. Magellan, Columbus, Vasco da Gama. They looked for, or you can say they discovered, they explored various places. They discovered places, they explored those places, and they helped their country in expanding their trade routes. Discovery of new sea routes helped in making new trade contacts. This led to imperialism. So since new sea routes were discovered, places were explored, so now what the countries they started going for, they started with new trade contact. Now what is a trade contact? A trade contact is when two countries come in contact with each other in terms of trade, when the things are exported or when the things are imported. Now you have read about a new term, that is imperialism. Now what is imperialism? Imperialism is a situation in which a strong country takes control over a weak country, especially in political and economic matters. Okay, so your next topic is new geographical category. So if new places are being explored, that means they are being added to the world map. So major changes at that time was the introduction of industrial revolution. You know what is industrial revolution? Industrial revolution was a time when the manufacturing of the goods moved from small shops to large factories. So before factory system came up, before factories started, before machines were installed, how was production done? Production was done in cottage industries. Now what are cottage industries? Cottage industries are the small industries that function in a house with the help of the family members or from the neighbors. But with introduction of industrial revolution, now that shifted to factory system. Now factories were introduced, new machines were installed, and production started taking place in large quantity. So where did the industrial revolution start? In England. So England is known as birthplace of industrial revolution. That means it started in England. So what were the changes that came about in the world with the introduction of industrial revolution? So first was new inventions such as steam engine, power loom and power gun were introduced. So now always remember that whenever there is a revolution or whenever there is a transition or change, always something new will come up. So such new things were steam engine. So one thing that I would like you to tell about the steam engine is, by this time or since childhood you must have read about steam engine, that who introduced the steam engine or who invented the steam engine? It was by James Watt. But the reality is that Thomas Newcomen introduced the steam engine, but he was not successful. So later what James Watt did was he made changes in his steam engine and got it patent on his name. Now what is power loom? You must be knowing about loom, that is used in cotton textile industries or textile industries. So earlier this loom were powered manually, but now they were used power looms. That means now engines with the help of machines, these power looms functioned, and that helped in production of large amount in very less time. Now what is cotton gin? So cotton gin is basically the cotton machine that separates the cotton fiber from the seeds. So by this time in the industrial revolution had spread in the various parts of Europe. So one basic problem that they faced was that the cost of production was going very high. So to control the cost of production, what they did was, the discovery of new places acted like a provider for cheap raw material and laborers, besides serving as market for their finished products. So now these places that they were explored, now they started using these places as what? As a provider of cheap raw material and cheap laborers. That means the laborers were bought from these places, the raw material was bought from the places. That means a cost cutting could be easily done. They had to not pay for raw material, they had to not pay to the laborers. So that led to the increase in the amount of profit. Cost of production was less, and they sold the product on very high prices. Apart from this, they had to not look for a market for themselves. These colonies or these unexplored places, or you can say these small countries, small places acted or served like a market for these places. So that led to introduction of colonization. So what is colonization? Policy of countries seeking to extend its authority over people or territory. So that is colonization. When a strong country takes control over a weak country and term it as a colony of it. So in this chapter you read about various changes, various inventions, and this is just 2 pages that I have explained you today. That is your first page and your second page. In the next video I'll be dealing with the other topics. But before winding up, just quickly go through the difference between the colonization and imperialism. Don't get confused. Colonization and imperialism are 2 different terms. So your imperialism, an act in which a ruler captures someone else's territory to merge it with their own to form a new single large country. So that is your imperialism. Whereas your colonialism is an act in which a ruler captures someone else's territory not to merge it, rather to keep it as a separate entity called colony. So this was all with all about your 2 pages. In the next video, we'll deal about the other 2 pages in which you have to read about the various archaeological sources. You have to read about the various literary sources. You have to read about primary and secondary sources of history. Okay, and then I'll also deal with the exercises that is given in your book.